Wonderful, thank you. I would like to call this meeting to order on the combined Senate Committee on Finance and Assembly Ways and Means Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. With that, Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Senator Brooks, Senator Dennis,
Here.
Senator Gogachia,
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters, Assemblywoman Titus,
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles,
Here.
Assemblyman Watts,
Here.
and Chair Miller.
Here. And as I mentioned before, we have members that will be coming in and out. They're actually presenting bills in other committees right now. We know that this is, part of the norm. And so as they arrive, can you please mark them present?
Of course.
Thank you so much. With that, again, just a few reminders that asking everyone to make sure that their telephone forms of electronics are muted. Also that anyone that would like to make any kind of public comment or anything today, that you're able to register online through the agenda when the agenda is posted. Get that registration number and the ID that you need in order to participate that way. Today we are hearing a few different budgets. We'll be hearing from the Department of Corrections, and we have, I believe, Director Daniels and Inspector General Jones with us who will be presenting. So with that, generally what we like to do is go budget through budget and stop intermittently to actually so that members can ask questions. So does that work for you?
Unmute.
You are.
Yeah, good morning. This is Director Daniels, and yes, that is fine.
Okay, excellent. So we are, there you all are. Okay, so we are ready whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Miller and Vice Chair Scheibel and members of the subcommittees on public safety, natural resources, and transportation. My name is Charles Daniels, and I'm the director of the Nevada Department of Corrections. As of March 1st, 2021, NDOC has an offender population of 10,894. This number excludes pending transfers from local jurisdictions. NDOC presented the state with budget reductions exceeding the minimum requested. We've also defended our strategies with the Sentencing Commission, ACLU, and federal courts. We continue to partner with the Nevada Division of Forestry to provide firefighting assistance throughout Nevada and California. We do happen to struggle with staffing in rural areas despite retention and recruitment efforts. And we've also developed an agency mission statement, vision, goals, and core values with a focus on the governor's mission to include public safety, staff safety, and offender safety. Next slide, please. Please allow me to introduce you to my executive team. From left to right, we have our acting Deputy Director of Support Services, Inspector General James Jones. We have Deputy Director of Prison Industry, William Kawanga, who also serves as our Public Information Officer. We have Deputy Director of Programs, Harold Wickham, who's up north with me today. We also have Deputy Director of Operations, Brian Williams, who's also here with me. We also have Medical Director, Dr. Michael Manev. He's down in our Southern office today. And then to bring it home, we have Christina Leathers, and she serves as our Chief of Human Resources. Next slide, please. Today, my team and I will be covering our mission and vision, goals, major issues, population trends, capacity and housing, the governor's recommended budget, medical and present industries, and then budget accounts 3710, which are the director's office, budget accounts 3751, which includes Ely State Prison, and then the budget account 3747, which is Ely Conservation Camps. Next slide, please. Major challenges moving forward are COVID-19 mitigation efforts to include inmate and staff vaccinations, healthcare, as well as hepatitis C costs, Ely State Prison and Ely Conservation Camp staffing, agency, recruitment, and retention at our rural locations, agency modernization and implementation of evidence-based programming, and strategic evolution of agency operations that will be more in line with corrections industry standards and best practices, such as integration of technology, implementation of a task-centric staffing model as opposed to our current post-centric staffing model, and effective interdiction of criminal activity by our offenders in our custody, such as extortion, human trafficking, narcotic distribution, and other continuing criminal enterprises. Next screen, next slide. What you have before you is the exact language in our mission statement. As opposed to reading it, I will just tell you the key points. We firmly believe we are mandated to operate consistently with the 8th Amendment that's listed in the U.S. Constitution, which also talks about safe and humane conditions for inmates. We know that we must prepare inmates for their eventual reentry back into society. By the time an inmate gets to us, they've gone through the enforcement end of our criminal justice system. They've also gone through the prosecutorial piece as well as the judicial piece. However, once an inmate is with us on the imprisonment side, we go above and beyond in trying to identify what their needs are, what issues are, if they have any addiction issues, or any mental health issues. We try to really identify the issues that genuinely impact an inmate and then put that inmate on a plan to be able to help him or her move forward with their education or vocational training or any other type of training that will lead to them as once they leave our confines, that there's a high probability, not a likelihood, that they will not recidivate. We believe that our upcoming programs in the future will help us meet those needs, and we're looking at moving forward with our partnerships with the private sector as well as labor unions and so on. We really want everyone to understand that it is our goal to be extraordinarily impactful on those people that have been removed from society. And when they return, we will have done everything we could to ensure that they can reconnect with their families as well as move forward with a life in which they have dignity and self-respect. And so that's where we are in our mission statement. Also, I believe it's the next, our goal, of course, is the probability as opposed to the possibility of success. Next slide, please. Our vision is very simple, but at the end of the day, we are going to hold our staff as corrections professionals, and we operate under the highest ethical standards. We're also by providing offenders with an incentive for self-improvement and the tools of effective change. This is a collaborative effort from modeling behavior to understanding our laws and how we deal with our inmate and offender population. At the end of the day, it's about ensuring that we treat them with dignity and respect and do not abuse our authority to make the life for these inmates better and to continue to move forward with having an impact in our community. Next slide, please. So what you have listed are several of our agency goals, and they're broken down, and I won't read all of them to you, but I will tell you this. We are definitely going to continue with our professional development. We're going to certainly spend a lot of time and effort improving our vocational training and all of our reentry efforts. We believe that we do this well and we can do much better. And we're changing the landscape, and we want to serve as the model for the U.S. in corrections in terms of preparing our individuals, our inmates, for their reentry back into society. So at this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to Deputy Director Wickham.
Good morning, Chair Miller, distinguished committee. It's a privilege to be here. For the record, my name is Harold Wickham. I am the Deputy Director of Programs, and I have the distinct role of supervising our reentry organization or division, which works in collaboration with our community partners to return offenders successfully to the community. I also cover the education, substance abuse, mental health, and offender management divisions, and we'll be talking about that in future budget presentations. But just wanted to give you that introduction. The next thing I want to talk to you about is our population trends. We've had two major events in 2019 that dramatically decreased our admissions. And obviously that was a reduction in the admissions as well as AB 236. And the big question here seems to be, how long will it take for COVID-19 impacts to correct itself? Well, obviously we can't answer that just yet, but we are monitoring it as well as the JFA are monitoring. Next slide, please. And you'll see on this slide our male population trends. The red line indicates the ledge approved projection forecast, and then you'll see our actual forecast, which was a significant decline in the male population. And you'll see the difference between that and the governor's recommended forecast as well. Next slide. And in the next slide, you'll see the same trend basically on our female population, just a large reduction in the amount of admissions. And then to kind of clarify that, next slide, you'll see on the male admissions and releases, you'll see that in 2019, we had 755 more releases than admissions. Well, and then in 2020, you'll see how that increased to 1,084 more releases than admission. So our population obviously is trending downward. And then the last slide on that will be the female admission and releases. Again, in 2019, you'll see a significant difference from 2020, where we had 242 more releases than admissions. So now I'm going to ask our statistician, Jana Bonacorsi, to cover the next two slides, which will be caseload adjustment and capacity in housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, my name is Jenna Bonacorsi, and I am a statistician with the Nevada Department of Corrections. In regard to caseload adjustments, you will see that the legislative approved budget for fiscal year 2021 shows an 8.3% increase when compared to the actual fiscal year for 2020. Now, when you look at the governor recommends fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023, you'll see that we're actually projecting a percent increase. The 8.3% increase is important to note that this projection was finalized in 2019 in a pre-COVID world. So far, for the first 6 months of fiscal year 2021, so as of December 2020, the NDOC has an average inmate population of 11,309 per fiscal year. So this will show a more accurate representation of where our population is heading for the close of this fiscal year. Next slide, please. In terms of capacity and housing, there were a couple major changes that took place. First being the return of out-of-state inmates from Arizona in November of 2020, and the second being that the common theme throughout this projection presentation is the effects of COVID-19. It has presented a different scenario than last session. What you see on the screen here is the projected male population and female populations in the governor recommends phase for 2023 June, broken down by custody level to give you an idea of the projected custody to come. Thank you, and I'm going to pass this off to Acting Deputy Director Jones.
Good morning, Chief Miller and distinguished committee members. I'm James Jones, Inspector General and Acting Deputy Director of Support Services for the record. The Nevada Department of Corrections is primarily funded by general fund appropriations. As the pie chart indicates, the general fund appropriation is roughly 84% of total funding for the department. The governor is recommending $665 million in general fund appropriations over the 21-23 biennium. The next largest funding source outside the reserve is through the inmate commissary cells, which is roughly $29 million over the 21-23 biennium. Additionally, the governor's recommended budget includes $5.53 million for room and board charges, which is a general fund offset for the Nevada Department of Corrections. The governor's recommended budget includes funding for 2,946 full-time employees department-wide. Next slide, please. The activity budget tracks performance measures used to measure the essential functions with which the agency is funded. As the pie chart indicates, the largest performance measure for the Nevada Department of Corrections is related to our medium, close, and maximum security inmates. The performance measure includes maintaining the staff and offender safety within the institutions. The next largest performance measure is medical, which comes in at 16%. Next slide, please. Some major budget initiatives for the governor's recommended budget are as follows. The governor's recommended budget recommends roughly $236,000 funding for the necessary replacement of various equipment department-wide with varying funding sources to replace equipment which has exceeded its useful life. The next major initiative would be the e-filing for law library. The next major budget initiative is for law library e-filing, which is a court mandate. This request funds 2 administrative assistants at Southern Desert Correctional Center and Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center to comply with the court mandate for civil and habeas corpus e-filing, as was previously approved in the prior legislative sessions. The budget initiative is funded with inmate welfare funds for $201,587. Another major budget initiative is the continuation of rural pay for staff at Ely State Prison and Ely Conservation Camp. As a background, the 2019 legislature approved a 5% rural pay increase for all custody positions to include lieutenants, sergeants, senior correctional officers, and correctional officers at Ely State Prison and Ely Conservation Camp. This request continues that funding with approximately $624,000 in general fund appropriations. Next slide, please. Now we're going to discuss some one-shot appropriations. First one is upgrading to Notice Next Gen. The governor is recommending 2.2 in general fund appropriations to update the Nevada Offender Tracking Information System, also known as Notice. The current system uses hardware and software that will soon be unsupported, which could pose a security risk and put our production systems out of compliance. If we choose to stay on unsupported versions of Oracle, we'll be required to pay additional extended support. NDOC is a key contributor of the overall criminal justice system of Nevada. The current Nevada Tracking Information System, or Notice, is utilized by numerous law enforcement and court agencies within Nevada, as well as the Department of Public Safety, the Attorney General, Parole Board, National Crime Information System, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Our existing application has limitations on its functionality based on the technology and various third-party programs utilized by Notice that are reaching end of life and will no longer be supported. In fiscal year 18-19, NDOC received TIN money to upgrade our production databases and application servers to Oracle 12. As we were way behind on upgrades with our version and it was going out of support. The move to the next generation of Notice safeguards against technological obsolescence, allowing the agency to utilize the most current and up-to-date technology available. The move to Next Gen also serves to protect the state from increased support and operating costs associated with software product end of life. Next Gen introduces features that optimize and capture of offender information and provide mechanisms that greatly enhance the ability of system users to locate and view critical offender details immediately. NDOC will continue to evaluate and invest in Notice, which is a continuously evolving product, which on occasion we're forced to upgrade. Similar to Windows upgrades, there will be security risks due to the inability to upgrade the Oracle database. The parole board, parole and probation, and approximately 20 interfaces will be vulnerable as well. Upgrading to Syscon's next-gen product will also allow us to depreciate our current Notice Web reporting module, which is based on outdated HTML page generation using SQL technology. This is currently de-supported in its own shape and form. To overcome this, we had to tweak the database objects so that it's supported while taking the performance hit. Support of Notice Web is labor intensive and duplicate for the purposes of allowing department staff to output data into Excel and performing some data entry outside of the notice. Our system administrator has informed the department that future upgrades to our Oracle database and application servers may render Notice Web inoperable. The next one shot is for the Department Offender Management System, known as OSM. The governor is recommending $1.4 million to fund OSM reintegration back into Notice. OSM performs the sentence calculations required by the Nevada revised statute and was built in-house with Java technology that we unfortunately cannot support. The reintegration will allow Syscon to provide the support. Syscon is our vendor for the Notice system. OSM is our department's mission-critical application that uses sentence calculation features that automates to a limited extent the calculation and adjustment of important dates associated with an offender's sentence. OSM has many limitations and is proven to require the utilization of both internal and external resources in order to continue to function with the critical sentence calculation process. Current sentence calculation is run once a month, every month, is now getting out of control with very limited or no visibility. The most important being the unavailable of the system during the calculation, which is averaging 20 hours per run. When NDOC originally purchased the offender management system in 2005, it paid for the license and implemented a module of software program that provided sentence calculations and accounting functionality. By implementing the sentence calculation and accounting features within Notice, this ensures consistency in the administration of all offender sentences within the state. A real-time calculation of offender sentences and accounting associated with these sentences permits effective and timely analysis of offender populations within the state and supports early proactive identification of offenders' eligibility for parole or suitability for community transition activities such as transfers to less secure facilities and community-based housing. Integrating our current unsupported OSM back into Notice will provide us with the critical vendor programming support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, needed to ensure that our department can continue to calculate offender sentences as per state law and the ability to make time-sensitive changes to the sentence calculations algorithm based on new legislation and the changes to NDOC policies and procedures, and generate and update sentence calculations in real time. Furthermore, with OSM tightly embedded within Notice, our system can be proactive in driving sentence-dependent business process. For example, when an offender sentence length status changes, a trigger can be developed that automatically sends a message to our classification personnel identifying that a reclassification is required. The next one shot is for surveillance cameras and storage area networks known as SANs. This request funds the continuation of critical camera systems department-wide and replaces storage area networks department-wide. The storage area networks provide data backup for services for critical software development. All these items are past their useful life. This would be funded with roughly $247,000 of general fund appropriation. A one-shot for culinary equipment would fund equipment at High Desert State Prison, roughly $102,000 in general fund appropriation to replace culinary equipment beyond its useful life at High Desert State Prison. There's also a one-shot for $196,000 of general fund appropriations as recommended by the governor for medical equipment to replace medical and dental equipment throughout the department that has exceeded its useful life. Additionally, the governor is recommending $6 million in general fund appropriations to fund an HCV consent decree from fiscal year 21 to treat inmates for hepatitis C. And finally, a supplemental appropriation with the governor recommending $500,000 in general funds to fund a potential shortfall in category 50 inmate-driven costs from fiscal year 21 due to the Superior Court ruling related to the NDOC nutritional adequacy for food in the corrections system. Next slide. The Nevada Department of Corrections uses an inmate-driven rate to capture costs associated with operating supplies, inmate supplies, clothing, inmate labor, and food and bakery items. As you can see by the chart on the right, the department is experiencing a 32.74% increase overall on average between the 2019 legislatively approved rate, which was roughly $1,310 per inmate, to the governor's recommended rate of $1,739 per inmate. The primary reason for this is the increase in food, which we have experienced department-wide. We have seen approximately a 35% rise in food costs in order to implement the menu based on the Superior Court ruling. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to our medical director, Dr. Michael Minev.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Michael Minev. I am the medical director for the Nevada Department of Corrections. The Nevada Department of Corrections has been proactive and flexible during the COVID-19 pandemic through the implementation of agency-specific CDC and local health authority guidelines. With the advent of the COVID-19 vaccine, the Nevada Department of Corrections is currently prioritizing vaccination efforts for all eligible staff members. Given that staff members are constantly interfacing with their communities, they are most likely to spread the COVID-19 virus to other staff and to susceptible offenders. As of February 26, 2021, 32% of Ely's total prison staff have been vaccinated for COVID-19, and 62% of the offender population at Ely State Prison have agreed to be vaccinated for COVID-19. The close collaboration of NDOC Prison Industries with local health authorities has yielded personal protective equipment for all NDOC staff and inmates. The acquisition of the Binax Now rapid COVID-19 test kits has allowed Ely State Prison to more effectively identify infected staff and inmates in a timely manner. Ely State Prison currently tests both staff and inmates for COVID-19 on a weekly basis. Weekly testing for COVID-19 has not only reduced the frequency of inmate outbreaks, it has also facilitated the clearance of staff to return to work in a timelier manner. The NDOC continues to identify and treat inmates infected with hepatitis C. As of February 18, 2021, Ely State Prison has identified 26 active hepatitis C infected offenders, 8 of which are priority level 1 inmates that will receive treatment by April 30, 2021. Now, NDOC Medical has partnered with Hope's Clinic and Renowned Healthcare to facilitate the treatment of these inmates. Now I would like to turn over the presentation to William Quenga, Deputy Director of Prison Industries.
Good morning, Madam Chair, distinguished members. For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director of Prison Industries, Public Information Officer. Speaking about prison industries, about our mission, what we do, new industries, growth, how many inmates working, and challenges. Our mission in prison industries is to reduce government operating costs, provide offenders the skills necessary to successfully re-enter society, and enhance the safe operation of correctional facilities. We want offenders to be released and have a way to support themselves and their families again. We are constantly seeking out ways to connect offenders with emerging employment needs in the community, because our strongest investment to prevent recidivism is to help them become self-reliant. Some of the industries skills they learn while in the program can earn them up to $90,000 in Silicon Valley and in northern and southern Nevada as they re-enter society. How are we going to fulfill our mission? Prison Industries is a self-sustaining operation. It provides meaningful work and job training to include certifications for offenders in the production of goods and services with little or no direct cost to the taxpayer. What we do. Operations at Northern Nevada Correctional Center includes furniture and medical fabrication shops, print, bindery, embroidery, screen printing, mattresses, and reupholstery, as well as auto refurbishing. Lovelock Correctional Center has a garment and a drapery factory. High Desert State Prison hosts card sorting and hanger sorting. Southern Desert Correctional Center hosts an automobile refurbishing and repair shop. New industries. With the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, much of the world found itself in a shortage of personal protective items. Silver State Industries fill the gap by producing hand sanitizer, face masks, face shields, and gowns. SSI Silver State Industries also welcome All Wire Incorporated from from Central California through the California Prison Industries Program. They moved their operation to Nevada to the Southern Desert Correctional Center. All Wire manufactures cable and wire harness assemblies, printed circuit board assembly, electromechanical assemblies for high reliability and commercial applications. It employs approximately 25 offenders. With the skills that they learn in that operation, they have a potential to earn anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 annually once they enter society. Growth. Stewart Conservation is a home to the ranch, dairy, and horse training program. In partnership with BLM, Bureau of Land Management, Silver State Industries in a bid process of increasing its wild horse capacity from 2,000 to 4,000 head. We have approximately 500 to 600 inmates, offenders that are working in Silver State Industries at any given time. Thank you. The whole passes over to Assistant Deputy Director Jones.
Okay, you know what? Right now, I would actually like to stop here so that we can start asking questions on the Department of Corrections, because I know that members are accumulating a lot of questions right now. So if we could stop here and just the way that our materials and resources are, we would like to actually start at the very beginning, if that works for everyone. So I see that I would like to ask one brief question just to sort of frame this for us all. How much does the state spend per inmate? Just on average, what is our average annual cost per inmate?
This is Director Daniels, Department of Corrections. Deputy Director Williams, you have the latest data on that? What we want to do is we can actually get you a figure. If you don't mind, can we get that to you momentarily?
Absolutely, absolutely. And are you saying during this hearing you'll be able to have it, or after the hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the next questions. First questions will be coming from Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the overview to this point. A lot of information. I know you discussed the inmate population, and I was just wondering if you could provide some additional detail on the factors that have gone into declining inmate numbers in both the male and female populations for the department.
This is Director Daniels, and I'll be speaking to that. Then we have subject matter experts here as well. Right now, there's been a confluence of many issues that have contributed greatly to the reduction in our inmate population. Since we started mitigating COVID-19 procedures, since we implemented them, the state was impacted greatly. For instance, we do not receive as many individuals from the local county jails as we once used to, nor are there as many trials. And many of the individuals who would have normally been prosecuted, they in turn were actually given tickets, and they will be their issues will be addressed a little bit later. So with fewer inmates going into the system and being prosecuted, with fewer prosecutions, and with all the other things that have impacted the state, for instance, with the hotels and the hotels and such being closed down and a lot of the places to eat, there just haven't been that many individuals involved in the criminal justice system from a prosecutorial end or an enforcement end. And therefore, of course, then the judiciary doesn't have as much to do, although the work is extraordinarily important. We do recognize, though, once the circumstances change, provided there are no additional issues related to changes in law, that we do anticipate that there will be an increase to what we would consider to be normal. And we recognize that we have we believe that the numbers will increase, and then we also believe that that will be a steady increase moving forward. But right now, we can't tell you all the reasons why, because we're in new territory as it relates to COVID-19. And but we do anticipate that the JFA estimates, those are the people that work with us on population data. We do realize that at some point in time, the tide will return, and then our inmate population will increase accordingly.
Thank you for that. And then could you just speak a little bit more? I know the chair asked a little bit about the inmate-based costs, but what have been the fiscal impacts as a result of the declining population in comparison to what was legislatively approved? Has there, could you just speak to what the fiscal impact has been to those declining populations?
This is James Jones for the record. I'm going to have to take a moment to confer with some staff, but I'm sure we can get something for you.
Thank you. That would be great if you can send that to committee staff and we can get that distributed to all the members. Thank you for the questions, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Assemblyman. I believe our next questions are from Senator Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to kind of follow up on that, on the fiscal impact, but I want to talk about the fiscal impact of transferring inmates from Ely to Pioche and what the impact has been on the current fiscal year.
This is Director Daniels. Thank you for the question. I will defer this to our subject matter experts. So, Inspector General Jones, did you want to answer that or respond to the question?
Yes, sir. We clarifying moving the inmates from Ely Conservation Camp to the two other camps that they were moved to. Senator Dennis?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, if you could allow me to just a moment, I can probably get something for you here in the next few minutes.
Okay, and while you're working on that too, I want to, and maybe you can answer this while you're doing that. But the timeline to reopen Ely, and what are the tasks and other things that have to happen for that for that camp to be able to be open?
Yes, sir. James Jones for the record. Staffing levels are so low at High Desert State or Ely State Prison. I apologize. That the camp was closed on July 8th. Let me grab my notes real quick.
Well, and I want to make sure I'm talking about the conservation camp, the Ely conservation camp.
Yes. The PCNs from the conservation camp were moved over to Ely State Prison to help staff there. I could refer this over to Warden Bill Gitter, or I can semi-answer your questions in when the staffing numbers are able to go up at Ely State Prison where they can safely staff our maximum state prison, then we could put staff back over at Ely Conservation Camp and get it open.
Okay, that's fine. That's what I was looking for. So what can you discuss a little bit about your intent to reclassify Ely State Prison and High Desert Prison?
For the record, Deputy Director Williams, over the past year, NDOC has had challenges has been challenged to identify and review best practices for our department. All factors such as public, staff, and offender safety have been taken into consideration while also adhering to the offender's constitutional rights. Over the last several years, starting in December 2017, we had a total of 53 vacancies. In July of 2018, that vacancy rate increased to 73. And in January 2019, we had a total of 83 vacancies. As we stand today, ESP has authorized 289 total uniformed staff. Ely currently has available to them 160 assigned positions that are filled. They have 62 vacant positions and they have 63 reassigned and unavailable for their use at this time. These 63 positions have been reassigned to other facilities throughout the state to help with their staffing shortages. This gives Ely State Prison 125 custody below their total authorized staffing. So that's part of the reclassification that we're looking at. And I would also ask that you guys be understanding to the sensitive and confidential nature of this proposal as we move forward, as it deals with staffing and the movement of inmates. Ely State Prison, current staffing 289 for a max. We're looking to reduce it to 223 staff for a medium custody facility. And then High Desert State Prison, they have a total of 516 for a medium security prison. Their staffing will increase to 582 for a maximum security prison.
So what would the budget implications be of doing that?
I would defer that to Warden Bill Gitter. If you could share that information, please, sir.
And include, you might have to do some capital improvement in all of that. So I just wondering that whole process.
Senator Dennis, for the record, my name is Warden William Gitter at Ely State Prison. Madam Chairperson and distinguished committee members, to speak to your question, Senator, essentially, by changing our mission or our classification from maximum to medium, we reduce the number of custody staff that are required to safely execute that mission down to where we can sustain it. For instance, with the medium mission, our total authorized staffing would be 223, but our standard staffing required to actually do the mission for sustained operations would come down to approximately 160. I have 160 officers on my roster right now. So instead of incurring $2.4 million a year in unfunded overtime to staff us at a maximum capacity standard, we would nearly zero out our overtime for vacancies if we flipped and became a medium security prison.
Okay, and so what about the opposite though, the High Desert? Because you're going the other way on the High Desert, right?
That would be correct. And Deputy Director Williams, you might be better to speak to that.
What exactly was your question again, sir? I'm sorry. Deputy Director Williams, for the record, what was your question again, sir?
Yeah, so you're reclassifying one to a medium from a high to medium, and then the other one's going from to a higher amount. So what's the impact going to be on High Desert?
Well, currently High Desert, Deputy Director Williams, for the record, currently High Desert is a medium security facility, and it's also our intake facility. Being our intake facility, over 70% of our inmates come from the Clark County area to High Desert. So you're talking about maximum security inmate, death row inmates already coming through High Desert State Prison. And it's also unique that it also is designed with electric security fence around that facility. So it's better able to accommodate a higher custody level at High Desert State Prison. So we do not foresee any major cost increases with this reclassification of High Desert State Prison from Ely.
What about the overtime and all the other stuff and the vacancies? How is that going to change?
We're hoping that with the increase of staffing and being able to recruit the Southern Nevada area and the Las Vegas area, that we will be able to increase our staffing to help with the overtime that High Desert you're currently seeing with High Desert. But also with High Desert, a lot of the overtime that you're currently seeing with that facility is due to hospital coverage and transportation that we have to do that we're not legislatively mandated for.
Okay. All right. I think that covered what I needed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I just, so everyone knows where you are in the queue, because I know it's a little difficult to feel it right now virtually. I have you go to Assemblywoman Titus and then Senator Gokachia, okay? And then anyone else who has a question. So Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. I actually have a couple questions, if I might. First, I want to go back to the prison population. The first question that was asked by Assemblyman Watts. And with the numbers that you projected and the about 10,000 versus 12,000 inmates right now, and the cost, the reasons for that, and there's a multitude of reasons, and we appreciate you answering that. But perhaps when you do get us some numbers, you could do us a comparison of where we are per population compared to other states. I think that would be a good thing to see. Right now we have about 10,000 people and we have about 3 million people in our state. Is that a national average, or where do we fall on what other states are doing, and how many folks do they have in prison? And if you're prepared to give us those figures on a national level now, that would be great. If not, all would be good.
This is Director Daniels for the record. We will be more than happy to gather that information for you, and we will follow up as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. And then another question, Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes.
I am curious about, you mentioned that on the prison population number, that included the inmates that we had sent out of state to Arizona that had been brought back to our state per legislation that we passed last session. And one of the arguments in the past that had been made for sending those inmates out of state was for their own security. Maybe they had a particular health reason, and maybe they belonged to a certain gang or group that they needed to be separated from. What I'm wondering is, do you have any statistics on those inmates, specifically regarding, has there been any increasing attacks or threats on their lives? Has there been any negative consequences to those inmates for bringing them back to the state that you know of?
For the
Go ahead, Deputy Director.
For the record, this is Deputy Director Harold Wickham. The consequences we've seen from bringing them back have been no more than any other inmate population, but it's been relatively new since we brought them back. But currently, there's no significant uptick from that population versus any other population. We were very cognizant of bringing them back, so we took our time and provided the appropriate spaces based on offender management's expertise on where we should house the offenders. And so far, we're having pretty good success with it. No upticks, ma'am.
Very good. Thank you for that. Obviously, they are our responsibility, and we certainly want to make sure that we keep them safe. And then finally, one last question, if I might, Madam Chair. You briefly mentioned, since we went through all these budgets, and so I'm kind of jumping around myself here. One of the the comments were that you had, I believe, 7 or 8 hepatitis C inmates that I think in Ely that would qualify for treatment starting April of this year, which I think is a good thing. And you mentioned it was going to be through the Hopes Clinic. And I'm just wondering, at some point, could you give us, and it's not, I didn't see it anywhere else in the presentation or anything that we had, at some point, would you give us an overview? I'm sure you're not prepared to do that today. Maybe send it out to all members about the number of folks that you've identified in that category to be treated, and potential costs of that, and access to care, as we had discussions in the past from a healthcare aspect and diagnostic aspects. If we just maybe give us an update. They are our patients. We know that we're responsible for them, or our inmates, and I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can for them, based on Supreme Court decisions, et cetera. So I'd like a follow-up after, at some point when you have more data. And no, you're not prepared to do that today. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the moment to ask the question, and looking forward to more information.
You're welcome. And Assemblywoman Titus, we actually will have a more in-depth on that topic in a few weeks when the Department of Corrections comes again. So thank you for that, because I think that prepares them for some information that we'll be looking forward to.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, he mentioned it. I thought I couldn't see it anywhere in here, so I was wanting to make sure we had some follow through. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, absolutely. It's in a few weeks.
Madam Chair, this is Director Daniels.
Yes.
If I may.
Yes,
I will follow up on several questions that we needed to gather the information. So I'm prepared to provide that information as it relates to the cost. Would that be permissible?
Yes. Can we just hold on one moment, just so Senator Gokachia can get his questions in, and then,
yes.
Okay, and then we're eager to hear your responses. Senator, please.
To
Chair Miller, and I'll probably expand your list just a little bit, Director Daniels, as I go with my questions. I am really very interested in the fact that we are still looking at reclassifying Ely State Prison and High Desert. I think it's critical to make it work. As our numbers reflect, the max in Ely is just over 50% of capacity. We know that's staff driven just because we can't put the staff in place. And the subsequent impact of that is the fact that the Ely Conservation Camp is closed. We've got a lot of resource work that has been contracted for, clearly will be paid for in many cases by the federal government. If it's wildland fire interface, fuel reduction. I know they did a lot of these projects a year ago, and that fuel load is still on the ground and has never been actually picked up, cleaned up. And I realize this is NDF technically contracts for it, but it is critical now with Pioche and Wells and Carlin trying to pick up the slack because of this huge void created by the closure of the Ely camp. A lot of the work is not getting done, and it is. So I'd like to know just what we're looking at as far as how long it'll be before we know whether we're going to reclassify those two prison systems. And otherwise, I'm afraid if we don't reclassify it, I don't know the ability to ever really staff the Ely Conservation Camp can happen.
For the record, Harold Wickham, Deputy Director of Programs. Through the chair to the Honorable Senator Gocochea.
You may go directly.
Thank you. Senator, just for information, just yesterday I reached out with the NDF, Casey. We had very good conversation about getting these camps back in business. We're looking at making some significant policy change as COVID starts to wane off, as our offenders start to get vaccinated. We're looking at changing some policy that will make it a lot easier for the NDF to bring crews out. I can't speak for NDF on their ability to provide the crews based on their staffing, but there's some logistics we still have to work out as far as with Ely Conservation Camp being closed. We're going to have to either take the offenders from Pioche or find a way to use minimums out of Ely State Prison. And that's a project we're currently working on. I talked to the director about it yesterday. We're also easing some of the restrictions for the Carlin camp. So one, we can get those community trustees back out to work. But again, it's going to take some coordination to make sure that we're COVID compliant. More than anything, we want to make sure that if we send the offenders out to work, that they're safe and the community is safe as well. In regard to COVID. So that's kind of been our big holdup, but I can assure you we've got the fire stoked to get these offenders back out to work as quickly as possible. And like I said, we're working with Nevada Department of Forestry to get these out there just as quickly as possible. As far as a date, I can't give you a solid date, sir, but I can tell you it will be in the very near future that we get these guys out. And when I say that, I'm talking within the next couple of weeks to a month, depending on COVID things.
I just want to clarify, Deputy Director Wickham, I want to advise him. I did speak to Casey as well after she spoke to him. And I did send a memo out to her as well as my wardens authorizing the use of the camp inmates with specific protocol as to when they're in the public. I also discussed that with our medical director. So that will start, it should have started yesterday, probably today, but I know it will be in effect on Monday as far as those crews going back out and doing their NDF fire crew and their mitigation of different areas throughout the state. So that has been approved, that is out, and everybody has been made aware.
And this is Director Daniels. In addition to what both of the deputy directors stated, I just want to state publicly, we have a very good working relationship with the Nevada Division of Forestry. And although we've had a very difficult time with the spread of COVID within our camp populations, we have always availed our inmates to go out and fight fires. And we know that there has been some concerns as to, well, what do we do if we have fires? Well, our crews still have responded to the fires and they will continue to respond. But some of the community trustee work, of course, had to be shut down somewhat, primarily due to COVID-19 mitigation efforts. But we are working with our partners and getting back to Senator Gorchia's comment, as we've spoken in the past as well. Our goal is to open the camp as soon as possible at Ely, but right now our staffing is so low, it's critically low, that we have to ensure we have enough resources to man the higher security level inmates. As our staff have an expectation that we have enough staff there to support them in the event we have some challenging situations.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that. And I really assure you, it is about safety, both for the inmates as well as our officers working there. But it's also a revenue side of it. Again, I believe most of these contracts, especially if it's resource work, even outside of fire, it does help pay some of the bills. And so, I think it is beneficial for all of us, including the inmates, to, have the ability to go out and work, especially if you're in an honor camp or a minimum security. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, just it's all, we're all trying to get through this together, and it's been a very trying time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Director Daniels, if you'd like to respond with those, with the responses that you were able to gather.
Yes, Madam Chair. Once again, Director Daniels, for the record. The first set of numbers I'm going to provide you are the inmate costs. Now, the reason that we had to go gather information, there's no one number, because it's based on the security level. Obviously, the higher security level, the more it costs to keep someone safe and to keep, be able to monitor them in a manner necessary, in a manner consistent with their security level. So, as it relates to our institutions, our overall operating costs are $51.19 per day. But when you break it down, there's $30.25 for our remote camps. For our non-remote camps, it's $22.11. For our transitional housing, it's $37.58. And so the overall costs are roughly $47.49. And I will also share with you, if we were to determine what our costs per inmate were, in 2019, the actual cost came out to $15,480 per year. And actual in 2020, $19,926. And then our projections continue to go higher, but the projections were based on data that was gathered prior to COVID. So although the numbers may change in terms of percentage, they won't be too far off of where they are now later on in the balance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. And was that the only response? I felt like there was another question out there, some more about the fiscal impacts, or are you still gathering that information?
This is Director Daniels. I do believe Acting Deputy Director Jones is researching that information, and I'm not sure if he'll be able to have it retrieved during this meeting. However, in the event we will certainly get that back out to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. And can you also submit to us what you just explained to the kind of the prices per day breakdown?
Yes. Now,
okay.
Madam Chair, I apologize for interrupting, but I think there's a side note that everyone should be aware of. As it relates to daily cost per inmate, there are a couple of caveats. So our daily operations costs of incarceration are authorized with each fiscal year budget approved by the Nevada Legislature in each legislative session. However, they do not include medical, administrative, or programming costs. So if you were to average those in, of course, it would be higher. But so I just want to ensure everyone is aware, and we can even submit the footnote so that you understand this isn't the entire picture. Some of the things that we actually do, services we provide, are actually unfunded, and we just work with it the best we can.
Okay, thank you. And we have one last question From Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And please let me know which ones to save for later and which ones are for now. One's just a general question, and then the other one had to do with the one-shot appropriation for food costs, and then the third had to do for E2225, which I believe we're going to get to later.
Yeah, so we're not there yet. So
should I address the one-shot or just
address
the general
that one, please?
Okay,
Just
thank you.
the one shot.
Okay, thank you. So, just one question in general, just making sure that I understood the director clearly. In your presentation, you mentioned that mental health and substance use was under the Director Wickham, your purview, and I was just wondering, is that also in collaboration with Dr. Menev under the medical director, or is that separate?
For the record, this is Deputy Director Harold Wickham. The medical side is definitely not under programs. That's a separate budget, but mental health and substance abuse, those fall under the programs division, which again, we will have a budget hearing coming up in the near future on those.
Wonderful. Then I'll leave it for that. I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly, just so I had that clear in my mind. And then the quick one-shot appropriation question is for the food costs, according to the court mandate, $500,000. I know of particular interest to some of our inmates is the not only the quality, the nutrition, and so forth, but also the availability of kosher food. And I'm wondering if that's included in that.
James Jones for the record. The $500,000, is my understanding, is to cover an offset of overspending for this fiscal year due to the Supreme Court ruling for to update our nutritional menu. As far as the kosher things, I could not say for sure if it's included. I'm being told it is included.
Sorry, you're being told yes, it is included?
Yes.
For the record, Deputy Director Quenga, yes, Senator Tolles, Assembly Tolles, yes, the kosher meal is included in that budget.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we have Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are related to the task-centric staffing model. Can you just talk about the impact on the budget? Should there be a shift from a post-centric model to a task-centric model? What that would look like?
This is Director Daniels for the record. Just to let you know, though, that the differences in the two types, quite frankly, are just a difference in our ability to accomplish all the tasks that are required of a corrections agency to further public safety, staff safety, and inmate safety. Having said that, we do not have an operational plan for that. That has not been approved. And so therefore, I just need you to be aware that that is not something we're putting into effect today or tomorrow. It's just something that we know we need to evolve in. So I'm going to be careful with my responses, once again, because it hasn't been approved. But the actual value in the task-centric is that many of the things that are currently required of a corrections agency, we either don't do or we do sporadically and typically only in emergent situations. Corrections has changed exponentially since the late 80s, and for whatever reason, we haven't kept up. So we want our staff to be able to do more. I do not anticipate an increase in cost, although I can't make that statement because I haven't done all of the research. But I will tell you this, we will be able to get much more bang for the buck, and we'll know exactly what we need to do. We can measure what we do, and we can ensure that anything and everything that we're responsible for, to include continuing criminal enterprises and such, that we have the amount of staff with the right training that can assist us in interdicting those problems. One of the things that I will tell you, quite frankly, we are somewhat remiss in is in dealing with the criminal element within our prison system, having an impact on the citizens. You will primarily see that through various forms of extortion and so on. We know that there are better ways to do it, but we don't have the staffing to accomplish it. But if we post individuals, if we put assigned staff that are worked to multiple tasks, we can still do what we need to do as a collective. So right now, I do not have any data in terms of number. I feel very comfortable in saying that although I don't have those numbers, that there will not be a huge change upward or downward. It's just that we're able to utilize our staff much more effectively and as needed and so on. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for the clarification. That does answer some of my questions around where you are within that transition and planning. I did want to ask though, can you just give us a brief because I know you said that you wanted to be careful about how you talked about this since it's not approved yet, but where are you in the planning process for that move from post-centric staffing to task-centric? And do you expect that to be something that's approved and finalized within the next biennium?
The answer is unknown because I can't, quite frankly, determine when this will come up, or we don't even have concurrence yet from the governor's office. And as you know, we work for the executive branch. So I'm very cautious about speaking in terms of times, only because we don't know. But I will tell you, we've looked at it. We've even created sample rosters. We also created not only the sample rosters, but how we would bid them and how a staff member who heretofore right now would be assigned to one post, one area for 8, 10, or 12 hours and go home. On a task-centric model, the benefits would be you can, at certain parts of the day, you will assist with shaking down cells, doing cell searches. Another part of the day, you may be asked to do some escorting. Another part of your day will be training. We will utilize field training officers, and then we'll have actual lesson plans on each topic that we can go in and follow the training of all of our staff. We have a responsibility for professional development and ensuring we're getting the best bang for the buck for the individuals that sign on and work for us. They also want to know that we care about them, and we will avail them to many opportunities to have experiences that typically under the current model, if someone has a post for a year and you can't get one due to seniority, well, you'll never get the type of experience that you may seek to further your own professional development. So this is a win-win for everyone, but there's a large piece of this that has to deal with our ability to deal with offenders that are still violating the law. So if you were to look at things such as human trafficking, distribution of narcotics, it doesn't matter whether an inmate's incarcerated or out on the streets. They can still do it if we don't, in fact, interdict it. The other one, of course, well, there are many I could actually bring up, and I certainly don't want to give up our methods, but I will tell you, we must do a better job. I believe that the citizens expect us to do a better job, and every time we find out that one of our inmates has extorted somebody's grandmother or has threatened someone, we have to do a better job, and I think we're focused on it. But once again, we need to present this properly and let those folks that will vet how much it would cost and ask the tough questions. We certainly want to be able to answer those tough questions. And so I'm looking forward to that process. But I arrived in December of 19. We started talking about COVID in February, the last week in February. And by May, we were in full-fledged protocol mitigation. So a lot of the things that would have normally been inside of our strategic plan, we didn't get to because the rest of the state was also having to deal with the same struggles. I will also tell you, we had issues with staffing like every other organization. Our staff could not go home. They couldn't take all this leave. We have to man out 24/7. So we did the best that we could, but now looking forward, it is something that I look very forward to, having that discussion with the people that I have to explain the processes on. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully we will be successful, and I will have numbers and dates for you moving forward.
Thank you. My third question had to do with the determination of staffing levels for each institution and facility under that new task-centric plan, which it sounds like we don't have even estimates at this point. But I will ask that you follow up with staff on just where the status of that is, to ensure we have the basic background information to move forward with your budget. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Assemblywoman. We have some additional questions by Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. And I apologize if maybe some of this was covered. I was jumping in and out for a bill presentation in another committee, as happens right about now. But this is around your temporarily reassigned positions, similar to Assemblywoman Peters' questions. How does the department utilize its authority to temporarily reassign a position's duty location from the budget in which the position was funded?
Thank you for your question, sir. This is Director Daniels. I will allow our Chief of Human Resources, Christina Leathers, to respond to that question.
Good morning, Senator Brooks. This is Christina Leathers, for the record, Chief Human Resources Officer for the Nevada Department of Corrections. Since joining the agency in December of 2016, it has been my understanding that the agency has the authority to reassign the PCNs, and we've been doing so under with the permission of the Executive Budget Office, as well as the Director and Deputy Director of Support Services during that time. As far as the history, I don't know how far back it goes. I know that since I've been the Chief of Human Resources, we've been tracking the data since August of 2019. There was a period of time where the Governor's Finance Office did advise us to return the borrowed PCNs at the end of the last biennium, which we did, but the direction was that we had the authority to go ahead and reassign them. Outside of that, so I'd have to defer the question to someone else on the team.
This is Director Daniels. I have no further comment on that particular question.
Thank you. It really is about the, and I think you touched on it a little bit. There was some guidance that was issued, and this is really about what changes to the department's policies in regard to those reassignments have been implemented as a result of the findings from the internal audit report that was completed earlier this year. And has there been changes to those policies? Do you plan on making changes to those policies based upon that audit?
Yes, this is Director Daniels, for the record again. Currently, quite frankly, right now, we are immersed in COVID-19 emergency protocols. But as time goes on, we obviously look at all of the recommendations, and then as we're able to, we will implement them. Now, when you look at some of the issues regarding staffing in its totality, we have a certain amount of individuals that are authorized legislatively to be assigned to each individual facility or institution. However, just due to the shift in the dynamics of our inmate population, we do move staff members around. All of that is seen as temporary, and it is always our goal to ensure that the legislature knows exactly where those positions are that they approve, which is obviously something we need to ensure we avail them to. But so some of what you're asking is future oriented, but if there are recommendations that we can implement and there's no legal reason to not do it, or a immoral reason to do something, we will implement the new procedures. But in terms of timing, right now, as with all the other agencies, our timing is skewed, and I do not want to offer at this particular time a timeline when I know that just depending on what's going on with COVID-19, I may have to change that answer. So right now we're just operating, trying to get through this trying time and really focusing on vaccinating staff, and then in addition to that, inmates as we move forward.
Thank you, Director. And if I may follow up, I'll just ask about a specific example about the correctional officer positions from the Ely State Prison. that were reassigned to the director's office. Just what job duties are those correctional officers performing for the director's office right now?
Good morning, Senator Brooks. Christina Leathers, Chief Human Resources Officer for the record. The PCNs from Ely State Prison that are temporarily assigned to the director's office are supporting our central transportation team in both the north and the south. So again, those positions are, our central transportation report is budgeted under the director's budget. So those PCNs are used to help with transferring of inmates.
Thank you, Ms. Leathers, and thank you, Director. I appreciate the answers to the question.
Thank you for that, Senator. Any final questions before we move on to the next budget for the director's office? Okay, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we are ready to, I know we stopped you in the kind of midpoint in your presentation, but we're ready to pick up if you're ready to continue with the director's office.
All right, Chairman Miller, this is James Jones, Inspector General and Deputy Director of Support Services for the record. We're going to do budget 3710 for the director's office. The director's budget oversees the department's operations through the Offender Management Division, Central Transportation, Inspector General's Office, Information Technology, Human Resources, Fiscal Services, Training, Purchasing, Plant Operations, and Compliance Investigations. The budget has 190.51 full-time employees, which includes 152 non-custody and 39 custody positions. The governor's recommended budget for the director's office in state fiscal year 22 is $29,599,099, and in state fiscal year 23 is $30,041,090. Decision Unit E228 requests funding to create one new assistant to the director. This request is for an unclassified position which reduces the personnel services expenditures by eliminating 2 vacant classified positions, 1 personnel officer and 1 information technology professional. The assistant to the director position will provide the director's office with an incumbent position whose work capacity and focus would be to assist in developing, implementing performance initiatives and providing strategic leadership, direction, guidance, and consultation to multiple departmental operations, divisions, units, and activities. Under the immediate administrative direction of the director, the assistant to the director will serve as a senior advisor and key contributor in fostering a culture within the department that aligns with and supports the mission, vision, constitutional obligations, and defined priorities of the department. The governor recommended budget for this request in state fiscal year 2022 is $58,887. In fiscal year 2023, it is $41,354. In Decision Unit E229 is requesting funding for a contract to provide a department-wide staffing study. The primary goal of this project is to provide the Nevada Department of Corrections with a comprehensive, objective review and assessment of the current security staffing at its prisons. This will enable it to perform security operations in the most effective, efficient, and uniform manner while preserving the primary mission to maximize public safety, facility security, and staff safety. Ensuring the staffing levels and posts are consistent with the department's mission is of paramount concern. The staffing study will be tailored to address the priorities and policies of the department. And throughout this project, we would expect auditors to communicate with designated department staff to ensure that they are paying close attention to local requirements, institutional culture issues, and the philosophy and mission of the department. Analysis will be performed with on-site assessments at each facility, including conducting interviews with all appropriate staff and department officials, reviewing data, records, and procedural manuals, observing operations and attending meetings as necessary to fully support the findings. In conducting these assessments, auditors will maintain a close contact with the department's leadership, and particular attention will be given to the optimization of consultant time and travel expenses through a well-planned logistical strategy. Finally, they will prepare a comprehensive and succinct final report that will be presented in a manner that will allow the department to quickly identify key findings and recommendations while providing adequate background information to support them. The governor recommended budget for this request in state fiscal year 2022 is $289,000. Next slide, please. And finally, Decision Unit E 5501 has got the governor's recommended budget for state fiscal year 2022 is for $1,258,937, and in state fiscal year 23 is $1,162,937 for a department-wide migration from our current Novell GroupWise to Microsoft Office 365. This is to align with the Governor Office Directive. The Enterprise IT Services manages all agency email and to better represent the needs of the Nevada Department of Corrections and to enhance the productivity of corrections staff. It is in the best interest for the department to migrate the current Novell GroupWise email system onto the state Office 365 solution. The directive to consolidate these agency emails on the EATS email system was mandated by the governor and is still a standing mandate. The department GroupWise email server is internet facing and needs constant patching and maintenance to keep on top of exploits. Office 365 in the cloud provides its customers with a much higher level of security. For example, Office 365 is patched and managed by Microsoft and is the first to receive security patches before they are released to the public. In addition, Novell software stack, which includes GroupWise, has been bought and sold multiple times through the years and is at risk of becoming a dead product. By implementing Office 365, this will better position NDOC for the future and provide a path forward. Office 365 will also allow for a more modern system of collaboration and document management, which would allow employees to remotely work more efficiently, better supporting the agency during pandemics such as COVID-19. Office 365 Outlook would replace GroupWise desktop client, Outlook being more modern client used to almost everyone employed by the state of Nevada. It is better supported in Windows 10 and much more user-friendly. The R&D invested in Outlook far exceeds that of GroupWise and shows in its ability and modern interface, providing a higher level of productivity. Smart 21 will require all NDOC staff to have directory accounts with EATS. Some of this cost will roll into Office 365. That ends budget presentation 3710.
Okay, great. We will come in with some questions. First question will come from Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for that presentation. I'm particularly interested in the budget E229 and the effort to do a little bit more study on reducing overtime. I know that that's been an issue in the past, and particularly in an audit in 2018, we showed that in 2016 and 17, there was a 34% increase in overtime. And I just wondered, could you just give us an update on where we are in more recent years and what we anticipate is going to be the savings as a result of this study?
For the record, this is Deputy Director Harold Wickham. Thank you for the question, Senator Tolles. I don't have the specific numbers on the cost savings. That'll be yet to be determined, and we'll provide that as soon as possible. But I just want to provide some clarity. This staffing study is kind of an overall broad picture of where the agency needs to be, because we haven't had a comprehensive staffing study in quite a while. And the last one we had was through the ACA, not ACA, but I can't remember. ASCA, the ASCA study, which was not that comprehensive and didn't go into the necessary detail. As you can tell with our agency, we've got some concerns. We can't staff Ely, so we have all these vacant positions. These vacant positions, we then try to utilize at other facilities as a cost savings measure, so we don't incur so much overtime, because we still have to provide transportation and hospital guarding, especially in light of COVID. It's been challenging for us to meet all of our transportation needs. So we use a lot of these vacant PCNs to cover those positions that seem to uprise that are not budgeted for. So that kind of goes into the overtime thing. But ultimately, it's about safety and security. And we need this staffing study in such a desperate way, because this also goes into our task-centric staffing model, because we believe that modern corrections needs to change the way we do things. And with a good comprehensive staffing study, we think we'll find more of those efficiencies if we bring in experts that can help us with this. And so I hope that answers your question to an extent. Again, I don't have those specific numbers, but I think this staffing study is vital for the agency to move forward in modern corrections. And it will provide us the necessary data so we'll know where we're at and what we need to ask for. I hope that answers your questions, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow up?
Quickly, please.
Thank you. So I definitely realize that we may not have those projections until after we have the study, but if you could provide to the committee the overtime costs for fiscal year 18, 19, and if 20 is available, I'd just like to see in comparison to how we're doing in more recent years from how we were doing in fiscal year 17 and 16. And one last question. You mentioned having transportation supervision to the hospital, and it's my understanding that in 2018, Director Zorinda changed a policy that we no longer needed two officers to escort an inmate to the hospital, and that was proposed to save $3.5 million. Did we, in fact, implement that policy change, and did that actually lead to savings in overtime?
For the record, this is Deputy Director Harold Wickham. Thank you for the question, Senator Tolles. We did, in fact, implement that program. However, it wasn't for the transportation. It was just for the hospital guarding. In transportation, it still requires a minimum of 2 officers, again, depending on the custody level of the offender. But one has to drive and one obviously has to supervise the offender. As far as the savings numbers, I'll have to get with our fiscal department and get you those specific numbers, because I do know we have the overtime numbers. I just don't have them readily available, but we will get those to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you for that question too, because I am also interested in seeing if there was a cost savings there, even if it was just with guarding inmates in medical facilities. I'm going to go ahead and have Assemblyman Watts ask his questions, and then I have some follow-ups.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just on the staffing model a little bit more, I have some additional questions following up on Assemblywoman Tolles. What are some of the challenges the department is seeing with the current staffing model? And what exactly prompted the recommendation to do this study?
This is Director Daniels for the record. What caused us to take a look, and first of all, when I arrived, it's just your routine assessment. You look at fiscally how you operate, and a part of that, of course, is overtime, but you also look at the types of violence that you have. You just do an assessment of where you are. One of the things that I noticed immediately is that we had these posts, and the staff been on these posts for a year in many respects. But while they're on those posts, they have what we call post orders. But in terms of matching those post orders with a silo of all the things that we must do in a modern corrections agency, we were Spartan at best in almost all of the categories, the things that would have an impact on the public safety, staff safety, and inmate safety. So part of it is we didn't even have a recognition of what needed to be done or what was available based on new strategies and such in the corrections industry and new best practices as it relates to industry best practices. As a matter of fact, because we were not accredited with the major correctional industry associates, meaning the American Correctional Association, when I did my initial review on all of our policies and procedures, I found that there weren't more to anything. So a reason that we would do X, Y, and Z would normally be because it's the best practice or an industry standard, no different than what a developer would have, or no difference in the practice of medicine or building aircraft engines. We weren't more to anything. So a lot of the things that were done was just because somebody in the past decided it would be a good idea. That never is helpful in court to say, well, we don't even know where this came from or why we're doing it. But I also realized, although we were very limited in staff, we weren't maximizing what we could get our staff to do while on duty. And many of them were on static posts, and basically, under the old prison model, pre-late 1980s, you had prison guards, you didn't have corrections officers. Those folks weren't involved in the programming or the mental health. They weren't involved in any aspect of an inmate's life other than to make sure they don't escape. Well, corrections has changed mightily, but our policies and procedures have not. So now, instead of me saying you're assigned to a post, we're now saying you get a certain post, and there's 12 things you have to do during the day. And this is the time, because sometimes, for instance, we'll need to use 7 or 8 people to shake down a unit where we found weapons, or we think we may have contraband such as a cell phone, and we need more people available. We can build that in. But also, after a person leaves the academy, there's not a whole lot of training that they have other than onboarding. So if you don't get a post or no one else is willing to teach you, you miss out on all the things that a modern corrections agency must do to ensure the safety of their staff and the inmates, and of course, keep the inmates from going home. So over here, post 8, 10, 12 hours. Count the guys once or twice, take them to the showers if you need to, and that was it. But under the task-centric, we can literally design our day to ensure that we get the maximum bang for the buck. A staff member that has been on a post knows he's going to be more than likely doing X amount of things, performing X amount of tasks. It gets them out, they get to learn more, they get to be around more staff, especially more experienced staff. And so what it does, it creates a better environment for the professionalism and the growth of each and every one of our staff. Most corrections agencies have a professional development program. We do not have one. And as far as I'm concerned, that's corrections malpractice. We need to do better, and we have it. The beautiful thing about our staff is they're really talented and they do work hard. So I'm so pleased with the folks that serve under me, whether it be from my wardens or my executive team or my officers. They are thirsty for information and knowledge, and they're willing to do what they have to do. But we as a leadership body have to provide a mechanism for them to ensure all the advantages of being a post-certified law enforcement official and prepare them for the future, because that way we're preparing the agency for the future. Right now, though, there's no way to get there because we're so short on staff. We know there's a better way. Once again, it's not approved, and I will not be get ahead of my skis, so to speak, on this issue. I firmly believe that I need to get this run through the appropriate people. Once again, though, all of this would have already been visited if it had not been for COVID. And once again, with my staff here and down south and my men and women out on the front line, we opened 24/7, and nobody went on vacation. Nobody stayed at home unless you were isolated or otherwise you couldn't come in due to quarantine. But we've been running 24/7, and we need to provide our staff with better, and we need to provide the citizens of the state and the governor's office and the legislature with a way of running our prisons that really focus in on the re-entry piece. Those humans that come to us, we had nothing to do with, but we certainly have everything to do with their reintegration back into society. All of this will assist us in ensuring that we do that. And that should be something that's measured when you look at our corrections. How many people are recidivating? What are the rates? Where are we missing it? Who's reoffending? What type of training did we provide them? And so when you put all of that together, we can be more effective and more efficient. But the beginning of all this, the birthplace of all this is new person comes in, they do the routine assessment like any other executive would in any other agency or industry or business, see where we are, take a snapshot, learn what we do, and then identify a strategic plan, embark upon a strategic plan after you put it together to be able to reach your goals. So that's where we are with that.
Great, thank you. There was some, I think, helpful historical context provided, especially at the beginning of your response. Has a vendor been selected for this study, and has the department worked with state purchasing on this selection process?
Go ahead.
For the record, this is Deputy Director Harold Wickham. A vendor has been identified, but no, we haven't selected one. That will have to go through state purchasing and an RFP to accomplish that. We just talked to a couple vendors just to get cost estimates on what we're looking at, and that was the average cost, was the $280,000 mark. And it also, if I may, indulge the chair to respond to a question that was asked by Senator Tolles. We do provide a quarterly report on overtime to LCB. And also a letter of intent that goes into very specific detail on the overtime cost and comparisons as to previous years. I can certainly ask our fiscal department to send an additional copy to the committee if you'd like, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
You, Chair, and just for the record, I appreciate the promotion, but it is Assemblywoman Toles.
I apologize. Sorry, ma'am.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record. And thank you for that detail and all the work you're doing, especially at a time like this.
I have one more question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. Assuming that this goes through and the study gets approved, what's the anticipated completion date? And then how would the recommendations and findings from that study come forward?
For the record, Deputy Director Harold Wickham, the completion date would obviously depend on the date we are approved to start, send out the RFP, get the contracting in. And once all of that's done, we're looking at probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months for a finalized report. Once the finalized report is presented from the vendor, we would certainly share that with the committee as well as LCB or any interim finance that may need it as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. I have a question on this. I guess to go back to this overall discussion, and I hear you saying, we really need this study. We need this study. And I'm wondering, do we really need this study? Assemblywoman Tolles referenced other studies that have been done. And it feels so closely to so many times we keep studying stuff when we already have identified the problems and we already know what the solutions and recommendations are. And we have obviously other states that do things well that we can look at and other good practices out there in the industry. So with this where we're not even there yet with contracting with someone. I mean, is this something that's really necessary? Are we going to gather data and information that we don't already know? Is there going to be recommendations and solutions that we don't already have within us? Is there stuff that we just can already do and we're not moving on? Or is this that we're trying to use this as the catalyst or the support to make those systemic changes that we know need to be made?
Madam Chair, this is Director Daniels. Thank you for your question. Part of the reason that we really want to move forward with the staffing analysis is because when you look at all of the things we are required to do just to stay in compliance with provisions that have been identified in the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and then the subsequent rulings that have come down further defining it, we, in our opinion, do not have enough staff to operate the agency effectively and efficiently. Some of it has to do with the location of some of our facilities, but the reality of it is, for instance, if anyone is coming in new and they want to look at our staffing, the first thing they're going to want to find out, what is the mission? What are you required to do? They'll look at your statutes and so on, and then how the most effective and efficient way to move forward with all of those. One of the things that you will find, I'm in my 4th agency in 6 years. And I will tell you, we don't have enough staff, quite frankly. So, well, how would that happen if we've had previous studies? Well, almost every single one of those will boil down to a post-shift relief factor. And that takes into consideration how many people you need to run your facility. And that will also include the time they're out on vacation, pay, and training. and this is my opinion of my assessment of looking at the last report. The data, I'm not going to question anyone's integrity, but the data that suggested that our post-shift relief factor is appropriate is a mischaracterization at best. And so there's certain things that we need to have someone come in independent, because from my understanding, the last group that came in was ASCA, which stood for American Superintendents and Corrections Agencies or something of that nature. But apparently, when the report came back, most of the recommendations weren't addressed. I'll leave it like that. But so we just want an independent group to come in and assess it. So when we move forward and say, listen, we need some help on our staffing, that was just not viewed as just pure 100% mismanagement, which is, from my understanding, based on a combination of a lot of conversations with the people I deal with, that apparently there's a notorious reputation of NDOC of basically just mismanagement. We're here 24/7, 7 days a week. We run many cities. As in with any city, you'll have crime. You got to deal with stores. You got to deal with the infrastructure. But I tell you right now, our staffing is not sufficient, which then forces us to utilize overtime on a regular basis just to get by. There's a certain level that we have identified that is, if it goes below here, we're at emergency level, because we don't have enough staff to effectively respond to an emergent situation. And because of that, we literally do our best to stay in contact with our field leadership. We're out and about, meeting my executive team. But at the end of the day, we don't have enough staff to do the job. That's just the bottom line. I understand if there's entities, whether it be government or not, that want to validate it, well, please come on in. But in my assessment, and I've got roughly 35 years of corrections, I will tell you, I've worked my way up. I was at the executive level in 2002. So it's not just something I've seen in one organization. This is my fourth. We're woefully understaffed. And so basically our staff burn themselves out just trying to have some semblance of a personal life. And it has nothing to do with the work ethic or any malfeasance. It has everything to do with, we just don't have enough humans. You have to have humans to run a corrections agency. So that's why we want to revisit it. And I do agree with you. It's been revisited. It's been visited in the past. But corrections has also changed. When I first started, there's very little programming. You didn't have to deal with inmates too much. In most cases, they were warehoused. Well, we knew that was wrong when I started. And we really improved, meaning corrections in general, and trying to make it better. And understand, we are not guarding inmates. We're not prison guards. We are here to ensure that when the inmates come to us, regardless of what they do, they pay their debt, but after the paying of their debt to society, they're then prepared to stay out. So we now have taken on all of those duties, whether it be in prison industries or us working with schools, colleges, universities. We have to do all of that now. We have to be good. And now we even specially manage our SMIs, or those are severely mentally ill, and we have to protect a lot of our inmates from via protective custody, because we do have predatory inmates. We have to do a lot to keep everyone safe and to keep them from escaping. And once again, if it hadn't just been for the extraordinary talent and work ethic of my staff, and all my agencies, the work ethic in this state is extraordinary, the corrections people that we have. But so I understand the veracity of your question, like, well, seems like we keep doing this, don't we know? Yes, but for us to be able to make a salient argument that we need more staff and why, we need a third party to come in and say, hey, this is what's going on. You do what you want with the data, but we need that data to be independent. And I want it to be independent so that it's pure in terms of what they come up with. And then we get to respond to how we can address the recommendations. But we need to move forward. We need to move forward in a great way. And there's a lot more things we could be doing, which we're working on right now as it relates to reentry, but we could do more. But we can't get beyond public safety, staff safety, and inmate safety. That's just paramount. And you have to have humans to address those issues. I want to extend my apologies for probably giving you way much more than you asked.
I appreciate that, Director, and you don't have to convince me about the staffing ratios. I have visited the prisons here. I won't publicly say how I feel or what I saw, not because I'm afraid to say things on the record, but for the safety of our staff. So you don't have to worry about convincing me about the numbers and our staffing ratio. I guess I'm just to the point where I'm like, ready for some action. And if that's what you feel will support that initiative, then I accept that. And with that, the only suggestion that I would ask is that when whoever comes in to do this independent study, please make sure that the actual staff is included in this process, that they have a voice and a seat at the table, because oftentimes the people that are most impacted, the people that are literally delivering the services, are the last people that are asked. And often the best solutions and recommendations actually come from the people that are directly administering and delivering that service, and yet often they are the first ones overlooked. So I would just think that also allowing them to be part of the process would be great. With that, I don't see any further questions on this item. So we can move on to the next ones if you're ready for with the prison and the conservation camp.
Chair Miller, James Jones, Inspector General and Acting Deputy Director of Support Services. For the record, next budget is 3751 Ely State Prison. Ely State Prison is Nevada's maximum security facility and is equipped to house and care for the most unmanageable inmates, to include death row, disciplinary, and administrative segregations in its population. The budget has 336 full-time employees, which include 285 custody positions and 51 non-custody. The governor's recommended budget for Ely State Prison in fiscal year 22 is $30,824,808, and in state fiscal year 23 is $31,702,008. With a base population of 918 inmates, and per JFA Institute estimates, this number is expected to decrease by 108 inmates in SFY 22 and 810, and decrease by 67 inmates in SFY 23 to 851. Both figures are based off the base offender population of 918. I'd like everybody to please note the M200 numbers on the PowerPoint are correct. However, they should have been put in parentheses to indicate a decrease in funding. Decision unit M200 adjustment shows that the corresponding cost of negative $219,332 in SFY 22 and negative $143,756 in SFY 23. Decision unit E375 is stayed below, continues the 5% salary adjustments for custody staff. This is applied to all custody positions, lieutenant and below, in order to engage competitively in local labor market and incentivize custody recruits and retention. The governor's recommended budget for this request is $297,717 in SFY 22 and $306,807 in SFY 23. This is Ely State Prison.
Okay, so is this it for this particular budget for Ely State?
Yes.
Okay, before we go to questions on this budget, I need to backtrack just to the last budget quickly, because Senator Dennis does have a few questions. So if you don't mind, if we could flip back to the previous budget, and then we'll come back to Ely State Prison. Senator Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to follow up on the assistant to the director position. Who's currently performing those duties? And how is that going to differ from your deputy director positions?
This is Director Daniels. I'll address that. I'll start out, then we can transition into Chief of Human Resources and our Inspector General, who's working right now as our leader in our services department. Right now, the vast majority of the duties that need to be performed just aren't being performed. But I'm going to have to give you an example of what and why. So, for example, there is no strategic planning process. I can't recall an organization that I worked for that didn't have strategic planning. And we can look forward into the future and chart our course and ensure we get the training, the expertise, the equipment, and the money. We don't even have appropriate liaisons for our stakeholders. With the exception of maybe our legal entity, we interface with literally all of these committees. We deal with all of the county commissioners, all of the mayors, the people that run these cities. We don't have a mechanism other than, well, who's the last person to talk to this individual? And as a matter of fact, when I got here, everyone literally just reported directly to me. And I had to keep my own note. I had to keep up with all of this. And we were not effective, and quite frankly, we still aren't. An organization without strategic planning is an organization literally flying in the dark in a cockpit. We don't know where well, let's put it this way. We know where we're going now, but there's just no formalized structure to make anything work. There was nothing that's efficient. When I arrived, we couldn't even find minutes to meetings from in the past. We didn't know who was doing what and who was doing what with whom. So in terms of organizational structure, our ability to be able to have basic meetings, like for instance, directors meeting and executive staff meeting, prior to my arrival, there was no such thing. And so everyone operated in silos. And I think a lot of what was skewed with the agency was that you'd have the silos that didn't talk. Well, we need to be able to have assignments, follow up on those assignments, have meetings, bring in our stakeholders, talk to the community, meet with the various people. But we also need to follow up on when we, for instance, look at what we do. We need to assess it, figure out what we've done well, figure out what we've done poorly. None of that was happening. It was just individual silos of individuals doing what they felt they needed to do because they were hired to be in charge of that division. There's no organizational cohesiveness. So many of the things that we're asking for, I'll be more than happy to go into some of the individual items that we will be introducing in, but many of the things heretofore weren't done. And for the ones that were done, it was hit or miss with no rhyme or reason. There's no standards. We don't review ourselves. There's no processes for staff development. There's no processes for anything. So part of this would be, we have a structured organization, we have our routine planning, we have routine meetings, we can all stay abreast so we can work as a team for the betterment of government and for the betterment of our staff and inmates. And so if you would like, I'll be more than happy to elaborate. I'm presuming that you already have a copy of what this position entails, but if not, I'd be more than happy to share with you what that person will be doing and why it's necessary.
Yeah, I think we have that list. I think what we were just looking for is just what the difference, what the difference is between your deputy directors in this new position.
The new position will not be at the same level as my deputy directors. They'll fall in a level right below that. But that person will report directly to me, and we can appropriately plan strategically to be a much better agency. And there'll be one place to go. What assignments are up? What projects are we working on? Where do we all meet in the minds and make sure that it continues to go? Something so simple as, for instance, follow-up to this meeting. And we had indicated we would follow up. Part of this, if somebody remembered to write it down, they might get something to you. But other than that, there's just no formula. Who monitors being responsive to the legislature, the assembly or the Senate, or the LCB? Who's responsible for that? What's our schedule? What reports are due? Who's checking on the quality of those reports? Did anybody check on the quality of those reports? Are we letting people know, listen, this is due in a week. You said you'd had it. You said you would have it into us last Friday. Where is it? Those are the type of problems you have when you don't have an appropriate structure, a command structure model that allows us to stay on top of things and grow. And it makes it much easier to self-assess. The other thing is, so for instance, my executive team, we're out in the field all the time. We have to know what's going on with our staff. And it was quite frankly touching with Madam Chair Miller mentioning that she knows how tough it is. Well, we were all working on an evening watch just yesterday, or the day before. We're out working an evening watch at one of our facilities because we know that we don't have enough staff. So we're adding in. But at the end of the day, I'm sure everyone wants us to operate professionally. I believe I have the most talented people you can ever find because the quantity and the quality of work that they must produce is extraordinary, and most people wouldn't last 2 months doing any of this. But I have to do better as a leader by giving them the appropriate structure so we can move forward and evolve.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have a kind of a hodgepodge because I got a couple other questions.
Okay, quickly.
All right. So the other one on the staffing study that you're in decision E229, if that's approved, can you, is that going to look at your management structure, that study?
This is Director Daniels. I don't have the actual written document of what we put out or what we assessed, but as a part of any of these, there should be a management study. I've participated as a team member on many of these, and you can't just do the piece on the line staff or the field staff. You have to do the whole thing because everything's interrelated. And especially when there's limited resources, we need to really have those people that come out and assess and do a complete job. But if they were to decide, listen, based on the money, we can only do the field positions, then absolutely, I'll take that. But we're going to request that we have more because we need an assessment from an impartial group. And I want them to be able to communicate with the legislature and the governor about where we are and what we're doing. I think it would validate the fact that we've been doing a whole lot with less. And that's our business model right now. Just work a miracle every day and we'll be okay. And that's what we're asking of our staff.
Thank you. The last question I had has to do with your elimination of an information technology professional. You've got some IT things coming up, especially that the new offender tracking system. If you're eliminating that position, which I believe is currently vacant, but how are you going to handle all the technology things that you've got coming up?
Thank you for your question tonight, and I will answer this for you. It was very difficult to offer that, but I'm new to the state. Yeah, I was advised by two of my former deputy directors of services, which includes fiscal, that listen, if you want a new position, the current environment is not good for obvious reasons, and I believe that that's important. So I'll give an example. With COVID, you have so many people unemployed. I don't want to be a burden to the state. So the recommendation after conversation with both of these individuals that, listen, it's probably not wise to just ask for a position, but it would be better if you were to offer something up. And it can't be something that's minor. We initially were going to do a 3-for-1 and just look at, well, places where we can't fill people. But I'm willing to take the pain as the agency leader with the rest of the state and be fiscally cooperative, for lack of a better phrase. I want those positions. But since I received the recommendation of the two prior deputy directors that we should offer something substantial and be able to show that on the books that, it's really not going to cost the agency. You just hire this one and eliminate the other positions. So our initial request was 3-for-1. Then we cut it down to 2-for-1, but we gave up more substantial positions. I do not want to give up those positions, but turn on the TV, every agency is suffering. I'm willing to do my part, but in a perfect world, there's no way in the world I would have done that.
So does that mean you're going to be able to get the technology stuff done or not without that position?
The answer is yes.
So you've got other staff and you're gonna be able to whatever to make sure that that happens.
We do have the staff. The person that would be most responsible is actually in this room right now on camera. And we made direct eye contact and the nod was yes. Just provided I have a clear understanding, it will be a miracle as well. But it appears we've been in the miracle business now for the last few years. So, we're going to give it our best shot.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Director, for allowing us to backtrack a budget. Let's go forward with our questions for the for Ely State Prison. Assemblywoman Peters, I believe, has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I do. So I wanted to ask about the impact that the 2019 legislative decision to increase the 5% in rural pay salary adjustments. So my question is, are all eligible incumbents in custody positions at this Ely State Prison receiving a 5% increase for a rural pay salary adjustment as previously approved by the legislature?
Good morning, Assemblywoman Peters. This is Christina Leathers, Chief Human Resource Officer for the Nevada Department of Corrections. Yes, following the last legislative session, all lieutenants and below custody positions are receiving the 5%. From what I understand, historically, the rural pay had previously been allowed, but due to budget situations that impacted the state, I believe in the 2010, 2011 time period, that was removed. So there were still some employees that were receiving it, but as of today, any new or active current custody positions of lieutenant and below are receiving the plus 5%.
Thank you. Additionally, I wanted to ask about what the impacts of that 5% increase had on the recruitment efforts and the retention of custody staff at the Ely State Prison.
This is Director Daniels. There are several people I would like to chime in, but I think right now the best source would be, quite frankly, coming from the warden that's serving up there. And so Warden Gitter, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, if I could have Warden Gitter respond.
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, for the record, this is Warden Bill Gitter at Ely State Prison. It is difficult to say with certainty how much impact returning the rural pay to those officers that didn't have it had on our recruiting efforts since then. I worked for the Department of Corrections because I wanted to move here to White Pine County, eventually retire in this area. And I'm kind of a unusual person, I guess. I love this rural environment. It is not easy to recruit people to this rural environment. People coming from more urban places have to understand, give up amenities to live here in this particular environment. We're not rural, we're very rural. One grocery store, hardly any internet, spotty cell phone service, no Walmart. If you don't have Amazon Prime, you're not going to survive. And you have to enjoy that. I'm a fisherman. I'm an outdoor guy. I love to chop my own wood, burn it in my own fireplace. Again, it's a very rural lifestyle, amazing opportunity for people like me here in White Pine County, but for the average person, the vast majority of persons, this is a hardship to come up here. And even though we offer a good job for a good wage, it's just barely competitive with the other industries that are here. And frankly, no, actually not competitive anymore when you add in the cost and the benefits package that our employees have to pay for. The 5%, I would say, made a difference to a very small minority of our recruits, but those recruits are absolutely essential. It takes 10 officers to staff one housing unit, 10 full-time employees staff one housing unit at the bare minimum. And if I retained 5 officers over that period because of that 5% increase, it made all the difference in the world. So we sincerely appreciate it. The staff still talk about the 5%, that they're happy it came back. But the 5% should be 15, 20, 25, 30% to make a bigger difference. And I wish it could be. We're 125 officers below our authorized allocation right now, running at 56% of our. I'm running 6 of 8 units with less than 60% of my authorized staff at a maximum security prison, being as careful as I can be to run a safe, humane environment for my inmates. And every day is a trade-off of 1-2 officers to make that happen. We are totally dependent on overtime to make it safe. And every dollar that we can give our staff to retain them at this point is helpful.
Assemblywoman, does that conclude your questions?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to clarify and ask really that you work with staff on seeing if there are quantitative values to give to whether that 5% has effectively increased retention in particular. If we're not collecting that data, we should be to acknowledge efficacy of these kinds of decisions. So, but that's the end of my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Gokachia?
To Chair Miller, and I just want to clarify, there is a grievance filed on this, and I just want to make sure that everybody now going forward is going to get the 5%, because clearly, as staff indicated there were a number of people that received the rural pay differential from 11 that didn't receive the 5% in the 2019 bill, even though I voted for it and I thought it was the intent. There were some that didn't. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the record that everybody on staff is getting the 5%.
Senator Gokachia, the Christina Leathers, Chief Human Resource Officer, Nevada Department of Corrections, for the record. Yes, sir, I am very much aware of the grievance of the 4 individuals at Ely State Prison in regards to the 5%. Those 4 individuals are actually had never stopped receiving the 5% rural pay, and their grievance is based on receiving an additional 5% in rural pay on top of what they're already receiving. So I do believe that they are actively seeking clarity from the legislature on how that 5% is to be applied, because the way that NDOC and specifically Human Resources, along with the Division of Human Resource Management, looked at that was, if you were not already receiving the 5% rural pay, then you were now entitled to it. And for those 4 individuals with that grievance, they are asking for an additional 5% in addition to the 5% that they're already receiving.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Ms. Leathers. But I just wanted to make sure the committee knew there was an issue there. And just because you got a pay raise in 2011 doesn't mean you got the one in 2019 or shouldn't have got it. And I think it's a grievance issue that still has to be resolved. So thank you, Chair Miller.
Thank you, Senator. And I have this questions with that, because I guess that this whole discussion is a bit confusing for me. And I would actually, looking at our materials for the Ely Conservation Camp, it seems to be similar. So I'm just similar issues. So I'm going to ask this question in referring to both the state prison and the conservation camp. But as Senator Gokachia was asking, I guess first I'm wondering why, if it was approved in 2019, was it not in the budget for everyone, or was it in the budget for everyone, but we still had individuals who did not receive it? And you can give brief, concise answers on this.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Christina Leathers for the record. It's my understanding that the reason why it was asked for in the last legislative session because it was not budgeted for all employees, but that there were some employees that were receiving it. So as explained to me by former Deputy Director John Barrowman and former ASO4 Scott Eward, when this came up in the last session, they provided a list of employees that met the criteria of lieutenant and below custody staff that were not receiving it. And the amount that was allocated was to be able to have budget to provide it for those employees to receive it that were not.
Okay, so then essentially that sounds like it should have been handled in 2019, that 2019 going forward, then everyone that should have received it should have received it. But now it seems like this is the request is to actually true up the budget to ensure that everyone's receiving it. So between 2019 and now, can you tell us how many people have not received what they were supposed to? Whether previous or current, but how many people are we talking about that need to receive this 5%?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Christina Leathers for the record. It's my understanding that all current active employees are receiving the +5, that this is requested so that we can continue the +5 into the new biennium.
Okay, so we don't owe any staff any back or anything retroactively. Everyone has been receiving it since 2019.
Correct. Christina Leathers for the record. Any employee that was not receiving it prior to 2019 is now receiving it. Yes.
Okay, so when you say now can be March 3rd, 2021. When did we start receiving it? And do we owe anyone? I mean, because you can say, yes, as of today, but in the past 2 years, did we, and based on the lawsuit that was brought up or the complaint that was brought up, do we have staff who did not receive what they were entitled to?
Christina Leathers for the record, Madam Chair. So in July of 2019, when this was passed, all current active Ely State Prison employees from lieutenant and below who were not already receiving the +5 were submitted and processed to receive the +5. Any new employees hired specific to Ely State Prison also received the +5 upon hire. So this again is the employees that are grieving it, they were receiving the +5. And so from their perspective, they felt that they would receive an additional +5. So they were already receiving rural pay. And they read the approval in 2019 as, oh, well, I already get it. So now I'm entitled to another +5 of rural pay. And so that's the argument is, even though I was getting +5 before July 2019, the legislator approved for me to get a +5. So I should be getting a +5 +5.
Okay, so then basically what you're saying is since July 2019, everyone who legitimately should have received the +5 did, and we don't have any employees who didn't or that we had to go back and make up for.
Madam Chair, Christina Leathers for the record. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming, because my questions would also apply to the conservation camp, that we're referring to employees of both the state prison and the conservation camp.
Christina Leathers for the record, Madam Chair, yes, both Ely State Prison and Ely Conservation Camp.
Okay, thank you for that. Any additional questions from members? Senator Gocochea?
Yes, ma'am. And just one clarification I want to make. You have to understand that July 1st of 2019 or whenever that time frame was, those people, that was what they were earning. They had got the 5% rural pay differential previously. So that is their argument. You know, on June 30th, they actually were getting this money, much money. The legislation gave everybody that was there a 5% pay increase. Their argument is, and it's only 4 people, but their argument is because of their longevity and their seniority, they were there. That was what they were making that day. And they felt they were entitled to the additional 5%. I just want to make sure the committee understands that. It was like everybody gets 5% raise, but you don't because you got a raise last year.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, not seeing any additional questions. I would like to thank the Department of Corrections and the entire team that you brought with you today. Oh, wait, am I missing? We didn't do conservation camp yet, did we? Let's go on to if there's anything specific you'd like to share. Yes, with the conservation camp. Let's continue, please.
Madam Chair, James Jones, Inspector General and Acting Deputy Director of Support Services for the record. This is Ely Conservation Camp Budget 3747. Ely Conservation Camp is a minimum custody conservation camp among other programs. The offender crews support the Nevada Division of Forestry's program by working on conservation projects and fire suppression activities with 12-member crews. The budget has 13 full-time employees, which include 12 custody positions and 1 non-custody. On July 8th, 2020, ECC was temporarily closed due to critical staffing levels at the Ely State Prison. The governor's recommended budget for Ely Conservation Camp in state fiscal year 22 is $1,619,582, and in fiscal year 23, $1,660,446. The base population is 129 per JFA Institute estimates. This number is expected to decrease by 16 offenders in SFY 22 and by 12 offenders in SFY 23. Decision unit M200 shows the corresponding cost decrease associated with the caseload decrease of $23,000 in each year of the biennium. Decision unit E375 continues the 5% salary adjustment for custody staff. This is applied to all custody positions, lieutenant below, in order to engage competitively in local labor market and incentive custody recruits for retention. The governor recommended budget for this request is $9,812 in SFY 22 and $9,968 in SFY 23. Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, I know we basically combined the two, the conservation camp and the prison, but I just wanted to check. And members, are there any questions on this one? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to the final ones.
Good morning. For the record, I am Ralph Wagner, the department's chief engineer. One of my primary responsibilities is to facilitate the development of capital improvement projects by interacting with NDOC management and Public Works Division, as well as their board. Clearly, State Public Works has an integral role in the CIP process, including estimates of cost and schedule for all proposed CIPs. In addition, Public Works manages the CIPs. They strive to have these completed in 2 years, but they have up to 4 years. Shown in this slide are the 4 approved SFY 2021 CIPs for Ely State Prison. ESP opened in 1989. Therefore, much of the major equipment and infrastructure is greater than 30 years old and beyond its useful life. Specifically, the CIPs are comprised of replacements of boilers, hot water pipe, HVAC systems, door locks, and controls. As you can see on that slide, the hot water pipe and HVAC CIPs have been completed. The other 2 are scheduled for completion this August. Next slide. This slide shows the SFY 22-23 CIPs at ESP recommended in this legislative session. Since Public Works does not schedule recommended CIPs until they receive an approved list, only estimated durations are available along with estimated cost. The underground piping project provides a good example of the CIP process and interaction between our department and Public Works. Last winter, a major leak developed in the hot water pipe or loop at ESP. Space heating to housing units 7, 8, and 12 was lost. Emergency heating expenses were incurred. Inmates were relocated. Subsequently, Public Works was able to reroute resources from a similar CIP, which is in the prior slide, to help repair the leak. So housing units 7, 8, and 12 could be reopened. Furthermore, Public Works supported the replacement of the remaining portion of the hot water loop to ensure reliable heat for housing units 1 through 6, 9, and 10. This is denoted in that last bullet on this slide, the 8.4 million SFY 22-23 CIP. So in summary, NDOC appreciates its ongoing good working relationship with Public Works. That concludes my presentation. The next presenter is Director Daniels.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wagner. Madam Chair, this is Director Daniels, and this ends our portion of responding to questions and so on, unless you have something else. We really do appreciate your time and effort of each of you on the committee. You guys have a lot of significant responsibilities and duties, and I'm glad to work along with you, Madam Chair.
And thank you for that, Director. We don't have any additional questions. We know that those final budget requests that you shared on the slides will be presented in the CIP and education subcommittees. But we thank you just for, presenting that as well. So, and thank you for your presentation and for your team as well today. With that, we will close the presentation and move on to our next agenda item, which is public comment. So broadcasting, if you could start queuing up anyone that is in line to make public comment. Again, just want to remind everyone that we ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes per person, and also that it pertains to something that is within the purview of this subcommittee. And with that, broadcasting, when you're ready, we will be ready for our first caller.
Hello, Chair. This is Michael from Broadcast. As of right now, the comment line is open and working, but we have no callers right now.
Okay, let's just give it a moment. So in case there is anyone actually trying to dial in.
All right.
Do we have anyone that has dialed in?
Hello, Chair. This is Michael from Broadcast. The public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. We did provide a few more moments to make sure we can capture everyone. So without seeing anyone on the line to call in and make public comment, we will go ahead. That concludes our agenda for today, and this meeting is adjourned.